Greetings, communication scholars, and welcome to this short narrated lecture about credibility. If you've spent any time in person with me discussing the topic of public speaking, you've probably heard me say the old James Hume quote, "Each time we speak is an audition for leadership." There's another quote about credibility, I think, that's related to that I'd like to share with you. And this is by the leadership expert John C. Maxwell. And they say about credibility, it is the leader's currency. With it, he or she is solvent. Without it, he or she is bankrupt. Credibility is one of the most powerful things that we can have as a leader. Conversely, when we lose it, we are certainly aware of its absence. Credibility is literally the ability to be believed. Each of your speeches should include some component where you give the audience a reason to listen to you. Ideally, that's located towards the beginning of the speech, and that is an attempt to establish and maintain credibility. In the slides that follow, we'll explore some facts about credibility and learn a little bit more about a leader's number one tool, their credibility. And on this slide, we have an image of a microphone. And frequently, if you have a microphone in your hand, you are navigating credibility. You're attempting to pull it to you, to draw it to you, to establish it. We establish it by using our words. Credibility is the ability to be believed. Is the argument that you're presenting trustworthy? Is the speaker credible? We ask ourselves several questions to determine what our perception of someone's credibility is. Number one is the speaker capable of producing a truth? Number two, are they producing a truth? Number three, do we believe their testimony? And then finally, number four, is this in their wheelhouse? Does the speaker have experience, training, and information that makes us believe them more than we doubt them? And for the most part, we are asking all of these questions at once, and we're asking other questions to determine if a speaker has credibility. Some of the first recordings of our study of credibility and of whether or not we should believe speakers goes back to Aristotle. Aristotle talked about the three modes of proof, which are ethos, pathos, and logos. Those three words are likely related to English words that you're familiar with. Obviously, logos is consistent with logic and with logical appeals. Pathos is considered with empathy or with something being pathetic or with emotions and the appeals to emotions. And then finally, ethos is an appeal to ethics, and it is an appeal essentially to credibility. And ethos and ethics are very closely related. So that's obviously an appeal to believability. Credibility means believability. What are some synonyms for believability? Well, the pigeons are having a high-level conversation about linguistics, and some of the synonyms that they have discovered for believability are plausibility, verisimilitude, validity, plausibleness, and credibleness. So if you hear somebody saying any of those, they're probably talking about believability or credibility. Part of engaging in that critical thinking is to make sure that we are doing credibility assessments. Is this information credible? Is this something that I want to believe? Next, from dictionary.com, we have a definition: capable of being believed, believable, a credible statement. Number two, worthy of belief or confidence, trustworthy. And I would say an antonym or the opposite of credibility would be incredible. If something is incredible, that means that it is incapable of being believed. Here we have a couple of people, and one of those people was the star of the internationally famous advertising campaign from Dos Equis, the most interesting man in the world. And the other guy has a matching bow tie that matches his slacks, and he's wearing those slacks well above his belly button or above his navel. And he has on some glasses that are being kept together with a piece of athletic tape. So those are the two images that I chose for this particular slide. And the title of the slide is The Link Between Perceptions of Speech Effectiveness and Credibility. So imagine all of the subjects that you think that the top speaker would be credible discussing. So again, he was the subject of The Most Interesting Man in the World and of that advertising campaign. Some of the taglines for stuff like that said, if he were to punch you in the face, you would have an unmistakable urge to thank him. His hands are like rich Corinthian leather. Anyway, just all of these really ridiculous things about him, and they show him in all of these amazing different scenes. And of course, he's just charismatic and does all of these things. So he comes off in that advertising campaign as the most interesting man in the world, as somebody who can swim with the sharks and do all kinds of amazing, remarkable things. Conversely, you have this guy who's maybe generously described as a nerd. So which one of them is more credible to give you a speech about how to be attractive to the opposite sex? Which one of those speakers, potentially, if you were to judge the book by the cover, would be a better speaker or potentially have more credibility on how to get photo files down out of the cloud, about how to program a computer, about how to program a appliance that is on a timer? Which one might be able to tell you about the best way to see Paris on a budget? Obviously, we're making a lot of assumptions about these two potential speakers, but credibility is a bunch of credibility assumptions. It's a bunch of credibility assessments. And we size speakers up all the time, even before they open their mouths. This next slide is kind of a thought experiment. And I get a kick out of some of my on-site classes sometimes. Sometimes I will tell them that they are unprepared. I'll say, you do not have all the required materials. I put a can of credibility as a requirement for this class. It's a required material. So please take out your can of credibility and let us begin. And there's, widespread panic. It's like, hey, I've got my flash drive, I've got my book, I've got a wireless presentation remote. I do not have a can of credibility. Where can I buy one? And invariably, I always say, over at the bookstore, they have all the required materials. And usually before, I let them get over there to the bookstore, I let them know that, I'm kind of joshing them, I'm putting them on. There is no such thing as a can of credibility. Credibility is what makes speakers believable, but you can't purchase it. It's not a physical thing. It's not concrete. Instead, it's imaginary. And just like many things that are imaginary, it can make you really strong, but it can also make you really weak. Credibility is the most important thing that you will ever have as a leader and as a speaker, and you will certainly recognize it once it's gone. You need to do everything that you can to establish your credibility and make sure that you vouch it safe with the audience. Credibility is predominantly composed of three components. We'll learn about those in the next slide. Credibility, for the most part, is 3 C's, and that's kind of what I like to talk about in class. That's character, competence, and charisma. I like 3 C's because I feel like that's alliterative and it's easy to remember. Character, if you wanted to use trustworthiness, those are similarities, those are synonyms. Charisma, the synonym of that over here, would be dynamism or being dynamic. And then competence pretty much is competence. So let's kind of go through character, competence, and charisma. Character is that, are you producing the truth? Can we trust you to produce the truth? Competence is, are you capable of producing the truth? Can we trust you to produce the truth because you have the intellectual capacity and you have the experience and you have the skill set to produce the truth? Character assumes that you have the skill set, but also assumes that you might be obfuscating the truth for some reason. And then charisma is dynamism. Is that truth fun to listen to? Is that truth well packaged? Is that truth something that we are compelled to pay attention to because the speaker is so charismatic or because the speaker is using things that are drawing charisma to their presentation? Those are the three primary components of credibility. In this next slide, we have a number of people and they are dressed in the costumes of their occupation. Those are things theoretically that bolster their credibility. If you see a medical practitioner and they have a stethoscope, then you tend to think, well, that person must know, what they're doing. They are taking some vital signs. If you see an architect and he's holding, big plans, you know that he spent a lot of time, she spent a lot of time designing those plans. You see a hard hat, if you see a laptop, if you see a tablet, if you see books, those are things that are artifacts, those are things that are, costumes, those are things that are related to these different occupations. And we have perceptions of competence that are based on all sorts of things. Factors that influence those perceptions of competence are credentials, occupation, experience, and finally, education. So if you are hoping to establish credibility based on your competence, it's a good idea to share statements about your education and your preparation, your experience and what you've been doing, your occupation, and how you've been spending the years, and then finally your credentials. Are there any special reasons why we should pay attention to you? Do you have a certificate in cybersecurity from Google? And we're talking about internet phishing attempts. Well, you may very well have a lot of expertise to lend to that particular discussion. These are all factors, credentials, occupation, experience, and education, that influence perceptions of credibility based on competence. Next is the citation of evidence, and speakers who cite their evidence are perceived by audiences as being more credible. Speakers should dig deep. They should establish resources or establish sources, and then they should brag on the credentials of those sources. This helps to answer the question that the audience is having. Yeah, but why should we pay any more attention to you? Why should we continue to attend to your speech? Again, if you're pulling in sources, if you're pulling in experts, then you're sharing the expertise of expert witnesses, and that should be a compelling reason for your audience to pay attention. Perceptions of trustworthiness are bolstered by the citation of evidence. Speakers who cite evidence are perceived to be more credible than speakers who do not. That is, provided that the evidence itself is credible. Citation of questionable sources decreases the credibility of the source. Visual aids can actually also increase perceptions of credibility, in particular if you are showing us results rather than telling us about it. If you're a dog trainer and you want us to believe that you're a good dog trainer, show us a picture of your dog doing a trick. Show us a video of your dog doing a trick. If you're informing us about weight loss, show us your weight loss journey. And we have a little inset of David Goggins there going from 270 to 170. If you want to teach us about baking a cake, show us one of your finished products. And that's actually a cake that was baked for my class and was displayed as a visual aid. Showing the results of your exploration and showing your growth in a journey or in a process enhances audience perceptions of credibility. Next, Composure and confidence. You have to look composed. You have to look like you are credible. You have to look like you know what you're doing. You have to look like you can play the part. Some things that increase perceptions of composure and confidence: being dressed well, or at least better than the audience, speaking loudly, standing tall, gesturing with natural gestures, making eye contact, showing confidence as a speaker, being prepared, being clear, organized, and easy to follow, having a solid outline, and following your plan. If you will do these things, audiences will perceive you as being more calm, cool, and collected. So we've talked a little bit about trustworthiness. Let's talk a little bit more about being charismatic. And part of being charismatic is being likable. You have to be relatable, you have to be authentic, and you have to radiate goodwill for the audience. To me, that's the most important thing. I want good things for you as an audience. So if you continue to pay attention to my vital information, it's going to make you more healthy, wealthy, and wise. Show that you're on the audience's side. Show that what you are saying doesn't just benefit you, but it benefits the audience. As far as being authentic goes, you have to let your guard down and you have to share legitimate, honest stories with the audience. Otherwise, it's difficult to generate authenticity. Another thing that can impact perceptions of your charisma and hence your overall credibility are non-fluencies. And if you are perceived as being an incompetent speaker because you have a lot of non-fluencies, that's going to impact perceptions of competence in addition to perceptions of charisma. Poor message delivery can decrease competence assessments. If the audience doesn't think that you're capable of delivering a slide or a paragraph, then clearly, a whole speech is much more challenging. Some things that compromise perceptions of your fluency: vocal pauses. In other words, you don't really know what comes next. The repetition of words or phrases, the repetition of words or phrases, the repetition of words or phrases. You see how you almost thought that I was kind of stuck right there? When we repeat ourselves, it means that we don't have a logical, cogent train of thought. Corrections of slip of the tongue. If I was to make some type of a pronunciation error, it's probably not best to draw attention to that by coming back and correcting it. Good example, and you don't see me do this very often. I said error instead of error, right? So going back and admitting to that and saying, oh, excuse me, I misspoke. We spend so much time smoothing over the miscommunication that it just draws more attention to it, and it makes me look less fluent and less competent than if I just kind of moved on and didn't go back and address it. And here, of course, we have a woman who is very tongue-tied, and she is probably in need of correcting some of the slips of the tongue, but she's just too tongue-tied to go back and do that. Finally, articulation difficulties. If there's something that I can't pronounce, that's going to radically decrease my credibility. And the delivery component in your textbook, in the virtual public speaking project textbook, talks about articulation and pronunciation difficulties as directly decreasing credibility and being one of the few delivery factors that actually does do that. This next slide is really interesting. On the x-axis, we have some bands of numbers, and those represent words per minute. And on the right, on the y-axis, we have not credible down there at kind of the XY intersection, and then up towards the higher Y number, we have very credible. So we have public speakers who are not very credible speak slower. In that 0 to 90 words per minute. People who are a little bit more credible are 91 to 130. People who are much more credible are 131 to 160 words a minute. And then finally, the most credible advocates, the most credible speakers, are the speakers who are speaking about 161 to 190 words per minute. Once we get above 200 words per minute, we begin to have a fall off in terms of perceptions of credibility and speech effectiveness. So up to 160, 190 perceived as very credible. Over 190, over 200 plus, that's perceived to be less credible because those people are not trustworthy. They are speaking too fast, so they must be trying to hide something from us, so we don't perceive them as being credible. It's interesting to note that a speech that you just got done looking at extensively in this class, the Martin Luther King Jr. I Have a Dream speech, is somewhere in that 160 to 190 range throughout. Speaking rate impacts credibility assessments. Increased rate signals familiarity, knowledge, intelligence. Decreased rate signals a lack of familiarity. Next, under trustworthiness is the position advocated. Audiences tend to trust speakers who advocate positions that are similar to their own. They tend to like a speaker whose message falls within the latitude of acceptance. Latitude of acceptance, I have some things that are unacceptable this way and some things that are unacceptable this way, and as long as your persuasion attempt falls in that latitude of acceptance, then I'm much more likely to give that a fair hearing in court and to attend to your argument. If the speaker's message is within the latitude of rejection, then that speaker will be initially rejected. And the graphic I have here is Will Smith and John C. Reilly and Step Brothers saying, "Did we just become best friends?" And that's because they're both advocating really similar positions, and that makes it easier for them to trust each other. And then finally, that deficit can be overcome with facts, but you have to be pretty deliberate in your persuasive attempts to overcome a strong latitude of rejection. Here we have an example about a latitude of acceptance and a latitude of rejection. We have a single payer health insurance, and this particular advocate thinks that potentially that's a good idea, and it's something that they would consider entertaining. The next part of our lecture has to do with trustworthiness, and it has to do with liking. And here we have two people holding hands. Obviously, if you like someone else, you want to get close to them, and holding hands has been one of the first signals of intimacy for couples, for a long time. This boosts judgments of the speaker's trustworthiness. If the audience likes the speaker, they will think that they're more trustworthy. Liking takes on a variety of different forms. Liking is intellectual, spiritual, attitudinal, physical, or sexual. And we can like a speaker based on any one of those different domains. Liking enhances perceptions of trustworthiness, but not competence. So if I like you, I'm going to think that you're more trustworthy. That doesn't necessarily mean that I think that you're more competent at what you're doing. And humor is a demonstration essentially of trustworthiness. And here we have someone about ready to slip on a banana peel. Humor increases perceptions of liking and therefore impacts trustworthiness. Bad humor decreases perceptions of credibility. Again, if I think this is funny and you don't think that it's funny, it shows that I'm not like you, and it shows that I probably don't have as much credibility as I thought I did. Trustworthiness and lying are really, really important. And here we have three former presidents. I think 4 after we drop in all of the speakers with the animations. And we have Pinocchio there situated amongst our presidents. Never lie to the audience. When you lie to the audience, it decreases perceptions of credibility. If the audience catches you in a lie, you will never get your credibility back. And just as we let off, a leader's credibility is their currency, and with it, they are solvent, and without it, they are bankrupt. Accuracy builds credibility, from John Rome. And then finally, a last quotation here about accuracy and about credibility from Stephen Covey. Every exaggeration of the truth, once detected by others, destroys our credibility and makes all that we do and say suspect. Your credibility is the most powerful thing that you have. It's also the weakest thing that you have. It will suffer through being wrong exactly twice before you lose it. Once you lose it, it's very challenging to get it back. Tell the truth. And of course, we have Bill Clinton dropped in to the slideshow. He is largely believed to be one of the least truthful presidents because of his constant lies about his extramarital affair. It is rare that the actual deed is unforgivable, but the lies that you tell about the deed, that's what's going to become unforgivable. And we had all sorts of people say, with regard to President Clinton, that it would have been one thing if he would have just, come clean about his extramarital affair with Monica Lewinsky. It was the dozens and scores of lies that he told to all of the people immediately around him that was the most damaging to him. Everyone kind of knew that he was a philanderer, but we didn't necessarily know that he was as big a liar as he is. And it was all of the lies that he told to try to cover up the Monica Lewinsky thing that most damaged his credibility. Ignorance is preferable. Tell the audience that you don't know. It's much better to tell the audience that you don't know than to assert that you do and be proven wrong after the fact, or assert that you do and then inevitably we find out that you really don't know very much. So trustworthiness is absolutely essential as a speaker, and the way that you vouchsafe your trustworthiness is by being trustworthy and by making sure that you trust yourself first. If you can't trust your results, if you can't trust your process, then it's going to be very difficult for others to trust in that process. Make sure that you're not lying. Make sure that you're being honest. Make sure that you are capable of producing the truth and that you are producing the truth. And that's the best way to remain credible. We've briefly touched on charisma. We've occasionally kind of talked about how competence impacts charisma. Here we have some traits of charismatic leaders. Charismatic leaders are self-disciplined, they're courageous, they're respectful, they're positive, they're creative, they're collaborative, they're enthusiastic, they articulate a vision, they're honest, and they're innovative. All of those things will make you more charismatic as a leader. To be more charismatic as a speaker, things like speaking rate, nonverbal behaviors that complement your verbal behaviors, and the use of really dynamic nonverbal behavior is typically what demonstrates competence with an audience. And here we have some charismatic leaders, and of course we see Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He's pointing. He's ultimate Riz. We've got Gandhi and Yasser Arafat smiling. We've got Fidel Castro and Che Guevara, looking very stern and kind of shooting a look. So that's what charismatic leaders do. And, they point to things. They use nonverbal communication. They smile. That's generally how we communicate Riz when we are the public speaker. And here's an influencer that I follow that I think a lot of. This is Vanessa Van Edwards, and she runs the Science of People homepage and webpage and kind of think tank. And she does executive speech coaching for Fortune 100 executives in Austin, Texas. And she is a self-proclaimed dork who is trying to figure out charisma. So if you are struggling with charisma, I would really encourage you to seek out Vanessa Van Edwards and the Science of People or People School, and sign up for her free newsletters and see what kind of thoughts this communication nerd, self-proclaimed dork is doing to be more charismatic and to make better banter at cocktail parties. I highly recommend her books as well. And one of those books is called Cues, and another one of those books is called Captivate. And they're both available on Amazon. And finally, a little workshop for those of you who are in the on-site classes or the hybrid classes, and you have an opportunity to kind of get together and workshop with each other and work on a little bit of credibility. Those of you who are in the online classes, you are just to kind of engage in this thought experiment. And you also have an attention speech and a couple of credibility assignments that you can engage in that might help. So I hope you enjoyed our lesson about credibility. Remember, credibility is the thing that makes you the most powerful as a speaker. It is also the thing that is the most fragile about your public speaking persona. It can take you a lifetime to establish your credibility. It can only take one errant statement to completely assassinate it. Make sure that you vouchsafe your credibility. As Shakespeare said, your reputation is the most valuable thing that you own. Vouchsafe your reputation and vigorously defend any insults against it. That is the heart of your credibility, and it goes on with you long after this class is over. So make sure that you attend to it and that you guard it.